Welcome to the Body Kindness Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Scritchfield, and I'm here to help you find your inner caregiver. You'll have more compassion, less shame, and the tools you need to deal with a culture that just does not want you to be free to give yourself fierce love. You are welcome and you belong in our community, where we value your well-being, we share our experiences and support each other on the body kindness journey, and we know that your health and your worth is not dependent on your weight. If you would like to enjoy self-care, be less self-critical, and make your life about more than your health routines, join us at bodykindnessbook.com/start.
And I would say, healthcare providers are part of this too, right? That there is very little looking at, okay, if your goal is to have fewer fat people in the world, if you spend every office visit if you're a healthcare provider, telling fat people to lose weight, what is your success rate? How many of those fat people lose a bunch of weight? And how long are they able to keep it off for? Because if you have a mandate with no way of meeting it, then you don't actually have a strategy there, my guys. That doesn't work. If you think that yelling at fat people or sort of lecturing us about the food we eat, or even just saying things like, are you sure you want to eat that? Or don't do it, Bernie, right? More to the point.
Yeah.
If you think that that's helping, what's your success rate? How do you know it's helping?
That was Aubrey Gordon, who writes under the pseudonym of Your Fat Friend, illuminating the experiences of fat people and urging greater compassion for people of all sizes. Her work has reached millions of readers and has been translated into 19 languages. She writes with Self Magazine, where she writes about health, weight stigma, and fatness. Her work has also been featured in Health Magazine, Vox, and Gay Mag, among others. She lives in the Northwest, where she works as a writer and organizer. Aubrey's book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat, is out now from Beacon Press, and her podcast with Michael Hobbs, Maintenance Phase, is out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever folks get podcasts. I was thrilled when Bernie was available to have this conversation, and it made it so powerful and meaningful to me. The book is amazing. You'll hear us just go gaga over Aubrey's work and influence, and we get emotional too. So I really hope you get something important, exactly what you need out of this conversation. I hope that it can help serve as a bridge to talking with others so we can do what we need to do to create a more kind, inclusive culture that just lets us all be human. So before I kick it over to the conversation, I just want to give you one quick tip. If you are interested in expanding your body kindness journey, check out this URL. It's bodykindnessbook.com/offers. And the link is in the show notes. This is where I'm listing a number of ways that we can work together. This is everything from a new group that I'm launching for people who are really wanting to dig deep and working with me in a group setting in the body kindness practice. I've also got some great supervision and a professional program called Learn and Grow, where we are going to be doing peer mentorship for 3 months. Also, the brand new Self-Care for Diabetes course and program, 14 modules that I've launched with Glennis Oyston. That link is on there as well. So thank you so much for your interest in body kindness. I would love to work with you. Check out that URL. It's bodykindnessbook.com/offers. Hi, Aubrey. Welcome to Body Kindness.
Hello. What a treat to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Aubrey. Welcome. I'm so psyched to talk to you. In all transparency to our listeners, we spoke briefly just a minute ago, and I straight up said how much I am fanboying right now. Aubrey, I had a chance to just jump into your book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. And I absolutely love it. And this is the first time that I get to meet you. And I think I love you too.
Are we allowed to say love?
Yes, we are so allowed to say. At my end, Aubrey, I hope you understand that your words literally just jumped off the pages and have nested in my soul and my heart because it's so similar to things that I've experienced, and I'm so thankful that you have given them such a beautiful voice to be heard and to be acknowledged, and a very strong voice as well. I love how you're wrapping that up. It's beautiful in the fact that you captured it in a way that made me feel so less ashamed of the life that I think I've led as a result of people's actions and feelings towards me and my body. And then, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but you bring it all around in a way that just is so empowering and leads me to feel that there's hope for not just the world and myself, but for our children and for all bodies. And it's just beautiful.
I feel like you guys are really angling to just fully make me cry. And, there's a first time for everything. This might be an interview where I just
totally your fault. It's totally your fault because I mean, there were times that, throughout this book where I just I had to pause and really reflect on very similar experiences that I never gave light to, like you just bury. It was just different from your experiences, but in reading what your experiences were like, all the emotion, the anxiety, the fright, those were things that I definitely experienced, when people just feel free and able to critique your body for just being.
I think the issue is that the fact body autonomy is something that should be absolutely sacred. And in our culture, people with thin privilege make other people's bodies the subject of their judgments, scrutiny, and basically it is dehumanizing and degrading and unacceptable. We should absolutely, speaking as a thin person, right? We with thin privilege, we should absolutely be questioning ourselves and our behavior and scrutinizing, why do we do what we do? Who taught me that? And how do I fix myself? I remember when Virgie Tovar was on my podcast and said, it's a lot easier if the bigotry to fix bigotry if the bigot would just stop being bigoted. I was like, good point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think this is like one of the things that I find both like generative and really challenging about body positivity as a movement in general is sort of like, yes, of course, everyone should have the space to feel confident in their skin and to feel sort of ownership over their own body. And certainly for fat people, for disabled people, for anyone whose sort of bodies place them on the margins, it is a really different path with a whole lot more barriers in play, right? That it is one thing to go through eating disorder treatment. That is a big enough hill for anyone to climb just in and of itself. When you add into that, clinicians who sort of chuckle when you show up and say, it looks like you haven't missed a meal in a while, that adds a barrier, right? When you sort of sit in group therapy sessions and hear other people talking about what a nightmare it would be to live in a body that looks like yours, that adds another barrier to your recovery, to your own dignity, to all of those sorts of things, right? So it's one of those things where I'm sort of like, oh gosh, yes, these are laudable goals. And also we got to do a little more work to make sure that everybody is included in all of those laudable goals. It's not quite as straightforward as it might be for a thin person, for a white person, for a cisgender person, for a, abled person, or for a person without visible disabilities, right? So on and so forth. Like, these are all sort of barriers that stand in the way of accepting our own bodies. And I think for fat people, I mean, like, Bernie, to your point, right? Like, we are sort of constantly reminded that we shouldn't think anything of ourselves. And we should be showing other people. We should be visibly performing that we think little of ourselves, right? So it's not just sort of an internal struggle. It is an external expectation of a performance of health and of almost like penance for just having the bodies that we have. And that is really intense and shouldn't be a thing that we have to deal with. And yet here we are.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's always like, hey, oh, he's the fat, funny guy. Let's crack a joke about this to lighten the room so that, you don't feel awkward being around me and my body. It's just a lot to take in, I think, for me right now in thinking about how I've navigated through life. And it's gut-wrenching. Your book really is jarring in so many ways because I start questioning, well, gosh, who am I? Who was I meant to be? Who would I be had I not been judged by just the way that I walked through the world? So it's very powerful. Tell me a little bit about how you even decided what to write about, right? I mean, I think it's the order and what you've described just so resonates with me. But I'm thinking to myself, how much crap I personally lived through, and how do you even think about how to put it down in chapter form? I guess that's how did you even begin to structure this? Because I was, again, if I were to tell the story of my life, some of it comes out as jokes. We know that underneath that is just this tremendous, for me, amount of pain and try to make sense of what's been said or done to me, and then to try to lay it out in a way that makes sense and is so wonderfully written and so strong. I'm just like, how did she do this? It's wonderful. So please tell me all your secrets.
So kind of you. So I will say it helps to have been writing about this for the last 4+ years, right? So like I got a fair amount of stuff to draw on, right? And I've sort of done the excavating of personal experiences kind of stuff. So
I just say I love that you were anonymous early on. I discovered you, because I remember you showing up on Medium, and I mean, you just got a lot of traction right away. But I remember just in the sort of the ASDA, it was like in Hamilton, right? Who is this kid? What's he gonna do? Like, I was like, who is this? Oh my gosh, and then all the mystery, like for years, I would wonder, who is your fat friend? I felt like your friend. But I have loved your writing and, very poignant, to the point, direct. Where else do you write for?
So I've written for Self. I've written from time to time for Vox. I just had a piece in the Times, which was very
awesome. Sunday book review. Yes, New York Times Sunday book review. That's amazing. Yeah.
Thanks, buds. I'm so glad to hear from you guys that you liked it. There was one letter to the editor about it this last week that was from someone who was like, I don't think this is the right approach. And they added a note at the end saying that the person was a retired CEO of Pfizer. And I was like, I bet you don't think this is the right approach. Cool.
You want to profit forever. Yeah. I didn't mean to detour from that answer, but I, as a fan of your writing and work early, I expected nothing less than eloquent, pointed, matter of fact, hey, this is what it is, which is my favorite kind of reading. But it does have an organization and short, even the chapter names, they're very short and to the point. And they tell a story. You could read the table of contents and it tells a story.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like what I wanted to organize the book in a way that subverted a bunch of, anyone's expectations, but particularly thin folks' expectations. I think that opening the book by talking about what it's like to fly as not just a fat person, but a very fat person, is an experience that even some smaller fat people don't necessarily sort of grasp in its entirety. And frankly, I don't grasp in its entirety. I'm a size 26. People who are a size 32 or a size 40 have a totally different experience than I do, right? So it felt important to start from this place of like, it's almost like small talk, like, how's the weather? Did you have to sit next to a fat person on a plane? How gross was that? Right? That it's like the most okay thing to talk about, being repulsed by a human being who's sitting right next to you. And it is one of the many ways in which anti-fat bias kind of asks all of us to just leave our humanity at the door in favor of seeing our bodies in this sort of ranked choice order, right? That is really sort of categorically, colossally unhelpful. So it felt important to sort of open with these personal anecdotes, right? And sort of talk about, here's what it actually feels like to be on the receiving end of this. And then here's all the information about why this is this way and what we could do to make it different. That all felt super, super important to me. I will say, as a bonus, my dad is a retired commercial pilot. And when I called to ask him about seat size regulations and airline deregulation, he was so excited to have somebody to yell at for a while. The FAA used to be a... Okay, great. So it was like a nice, fun opportunity to talk to my dad about that stuff too. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, it felt like structuring things around sort of introducing folks to their own expectations and then figuring out how to subvert them felt really important to sort of upending the way that folks think about this issue.
Yeah, when I was reading that chapter, I kept thinking about a PBS documentary that I recently watched that was all about how America got its highway system and like the racist history of that. And there was interesting conversation around ways in which you can keep people contained by preventing them from being able to travel. And when I was reading your first chapter, I was just making these connections that, having a super fat mom, who travels with her mom, like, I'm doing all the caregiving things and I don't experience it. It's never the same, but witnessing it is very personally painful. And seeing all the emotional labor that you need to put in just to help your parent travel to see other family, joyful or sorrowful. We lost my grandmother this year during COVID, and there are systemic reasons why this is a problem. And I appreciate that because we can, an individual is going to read a book and question their lives and work to be better. That's the hope, right? But I also think work within ourselves while we also are more aware and can do whatever we can to call out the system and also help the system change. So,
first of all, I'm so sorry to hear about your grandmother. That's incredibly, incredibly rough.
Yeah.
And second of all, I'm so heartened to hear you talk about traveling with a super fat family member, because I do think like that moment, I would imagine, gives you a great deal of insight into how other people receive your mom and people who are in bodies like your mom's. But also, again, the ways in which when we kind of buy into this system of thinking that some bodies are naturally superior to other bodies, right? What we're buying into is, first of all, like, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from eugenics, guys. Like, just to be super real, like, just right around the corner from eugenics. And second of all, we are deciding in a subconscious but still pretty active way who we will respect, right? Yeah. We are deciding in that moment, as we sort of like receive people in those moments, we are deciding who is worthy of our respect, who is worthy of being seen as a human being, who is worthy of being treated with basic dignity, right? And, at least for me, the airport is such a little microcosm of that,
Right. Well, and just when you look at the, all the money that the top CEOs make or in the airline industry, let's just say, it's like, you mean you can't figure out a way to not charge somebody double if they need 2 seats to be comfortable? You can't figure out a way to make it against company policy to harass other flyers. You can't find a way to have different seats. I mean, I don't do all of those jobs, but I feel like where there's a will, there is a way. And what it comes down to, it's an issue of being unwilling because there's going to be a sacrifice in system change and profits. And that's what we're willing to trade.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like a tiny version of that is what we've seen during COVID, which is like every airline magically is like, we don't have ticket change fees anymore. Right? Like every airline has just been like, you don't have to pay us $150 to change your seat anymore, to change your flight. You can just do that, which is like, it's really interesting, I think, the ways in which we sort of align ourselves with institutions, right? The number of people who I've sort of talked to about what it's like to be a fat person on a plane, who I'll back up and say I've spent the last 12 years as a progressive community organizer, working in LGBTQ communities, working with immigrant communities, so on and so forth. And it's been really fascinating that even labor organizers that I know, when I talk about sort of what it's like to be a fat person on a plane, will say things like, well, the airline's got to protect its bottom line, right? Where you're sort of like, what happened here that we are all more inclined to align ourselves with a corporation that for most of the rest of the time, all of us are griping about, right? But in this moment, there's sort of this like, again, like moment of like, choose your fighter, right? Mm-hmm. Are you going to choose the Mortal Kombat character that is like fat lady on a plane? Or are you going to choose the Mortal Kombat character that is like faceless airline CEO? And it really feels like 9 times out of 10, people are like, I'm going with that CEO, right? That is such a weird, powerful statement to me always about like, oh, this is where fat people land in your sort of schema of thinking about who matters and who's worth empathizing with. I don't know.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, I'm literally just nodding because I mean, a lot of these experiences, obviously, I have experienced firsthand. I have my own seatbelt extender that I just travel with because I don't even want to ask for it. I literally get into a seat and see how small I can shrink myself so that I'm not an inconvenience to anybody next to me. So it's, if I can, I'll get next to a window so that I don't have to be moved past, right? And then I can also kind of lean into the window and to the wall, the interior wall of the plane so that I'm not, touching somebody else. And then if I do touch somebody else, I break out in a cold sweat. Like, oh my gosh, any minute they're going to say something to me. So again, I mean, I can completely relate. And I know that I'm not the only one out there. And it's one of those things like we said, it's like, oh, I'm not the only one. Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, totally.
Are being made to feel this way. So,
and it's really just the tip of the iceberg. Like there are many ways in which higher weight people are dehumanized.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, one of the chapters that really resonated with me and Rebecca, we talk about it all the time, was just about, medicine and how scary it is to be in a big body and think or hope that we're going to get the medical treatment that is just every human should get. I was just speaking with Rebecca, oh gosh, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we recorded. And this is how scary it got for me. I shared with Rebecca that should I come down with COVID, that I was, because I'm a newer father, I have a soon-to-be 5-year-old and a just turned 1-year-old. I thought to myself, I should probably have my wife or I write with permanent marker on my chest, kind of giving my deets, like, don't give up on me because of my size. And when I read here that chapter, I that thought and me sharing that out loud came back like, oh my God, like this fear is warranted.
Yeah, totally.
Like, hey, I've always been this size. I'm a new father. I'm super nice. Yeah, I'm in a big body. Please give me the ventilator if there's one available,
Totally. Also, I don't know how many, I'm going to say thin white cis people, we'll just put it in that container for now, right? Have to say, hey, I'm super nice to their healthcare provider. Will you not give up on providing me healthcare? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just it's a real
like
rough
there's
go.
literally like this weird scenario that plays in my mind where, I'm sick. There's another, thin, straight sized person next to me, and they are, it's kind of like oh, well, which one? Oh, well, obviously this one. This one's lived a life that, is more conducive to be worth saving. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and there were some at the very, very beginning of the pandemic, there were some of those like press releases that came out from hospitals sort of preemptively announcing that they would not be providing ventilators to fat people.
Yes,
which I was just like, wow, if that isn't a clear statement of the worth of our lives in this moment, like, I don't know what is. Ugh.
Yeah.
But Rebecca, I'm super curious as a clinician.
Mm-hmm.
I have to imagine that this stuff pops up all over the place, both in your sort of work with folks individually, but also in training, also in like professional settings. I'm curious about sort of like, is there stuff that comes up for you over and over and over again as a provider? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the field of dietetics is abysmal. There have been the teeniest of steps. So like today's Dietitian is a magazine that reaches probably 70,000 plus subscribers. And so it's an industry magazine. And so I said, I would really like to talk about body shame and about how dietitians can hold space for not having the experiences of people they're working with. And I did something that I thought that I could do that wouldn't result in somebody just ripping up my article. Understand that in my experience, when I was talking openly about being health at every size, I would get practitioners who would get in my face angrily about it, finger wagging, just rage at me. I don't agree with this. And, there's the rage, and there was what's the harm if someone wants to lose 5 pounds, Rebecca? And I'm just thinking that's not what happens. And so there was this whole personal thing where I had to lose people who I thought were friends, basically, let myself get mistreated and stand for what I believed in. And for me, it was this form of I've been using this phrase fierce love lately. And to me, it was one of this, wish I would have thought of that when I wrote Body Kindness, but maybe there'll be another one. But it's this idea of be fierce against the culture and where you need to be fierce and be loving where you need to be loving. And so there's that element, right? There's in the field of dietetics, it's there's sides and whose side are you on? And we get lost in the weeds of humans fighting with each other as opposed to the bigger picture of within the field of health, what does it mean to help people care for their health? To me, you lose me if it's not mental health and physical health united and together, right? So you don't have to know it all or do it all, but you need to be able to expand what your definition of health is. You need to be able to expand that it includes social justice and access. And like I said, you hit us throughout this book in beautiful ways, right? About the systemic barriers. So I guess I don't even know if I'm answering the question, but I think insofar as I would love every dietitian to identify as being at least weight neutral. If you can't get on board with health at every size yet, could you at least understand and be open to weight neutral? And then I would add, I've given presentations to the, big air quotes, fitness industry. And it's just where you need to meet people where they are. It's this revelation to talk about being nice to people when you're training them, as opposed to be I'm going to kill you. And, Bernie, Bernie, I don't know if you want to share about ACSM.
Yeah. Oh, I totally read it. I mean, it's you mentioned Biggest Loser in there, and
Hi, sorry.
No. As a matter of fact, I mean,
he needs to be more outwardly angry.
Well, and this is what again, I've shared with Rebecca time and time again. I part of the reason why I am so into our podcast and our conversations is I really feel like I have some ground to make up. Like I got some apologizing to do to myself first and to the world second. And what I mean by that is not, it's not, that I am the one responsible, but I definitely played a role because I didn't know, it was what society has always had me feel about myself or told me about myself. So every time I got screamed at by a trainer or told to, look a little bit sadder or question why my life was a little bit more miserable than a thin person's, in order to have my story be more compelling or people be able to relate to me more, I didn't realize what I was perpetuating, and I'll tell you what, and it cracks me up because in retrospect, I could see how this would have pissed them off a bit. I've always been pretty happy. It was actually after my time on the show where shit got sad, like literally. So I remember them asking, so why do you want to be on The Biggest Loser? And my response was, and I think it was jarring to them at first, and maybe it got them to look at me closer. I was like, well, because fuck, I've lived life big in an awesome way. I just want to see if thin is all it's freaking cracked up to be. Like literally, like that was my response. It's like, well, shit, I've lived a great big life, and if everybody's saying being thin is awesome, well then holy shit, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be one huge rave. Like it's going to be like grab the glow sticks because this is going to be a nonstop party because I'm already a freaking good time. So yeah, and unfortunately, when they asked that question to other interviewees around the table, you got a lot of sob stories and you got people breaking down and you got them, questioning their worth and, oh my gosh, I can't have children because of what I've done to my body and I can't find love because no one finds me desirable. And, all of a sudden Bernie comes out and says, well, shit, my life's been great. And I just want to try to, see if being in a smaller body is all it's cracked up to be. So again, I'm so glad that you brought it up. And the way that you brought it up, I think was awesome. You talk about, how we feel like it's okay to be yelled at because of the body that we're in, given that we've been told that our body isn't as worthy as a thin body.
Well, and first of all, I should say, I totally hear you on feeling like you need to make up ground and all that sort of stuff. Those are all your feelings and all your experiences that I have not had and cannot speak to. But what I will say is my official position on this and all things is I am not ever going to judge how a fat person deals with anti-fatness. I'm not ever going to judge a fat person for having weight loss surgery. I am not ever going to judge a fat person for dieting. I am not ever going to judge a fat person for going on a show like The Biggest Loser or The Swan or Extreme Makeover or whatever, right? All of those are drastic solutions to a problem that has been presented to us time and time again. That is, our bodies are the issue, and the only way out is to change our bodies, right? So I don't ever, ever, ever fault fat people for going down that road because it's the only one, right? That's provided to us.
Sure. But for me, it was just, I think on our podcast, I just try as genuinely as possible to be the voice that I needed to hear. And what I mean by that is, we just, need to hear that we're beautiful, that we're worthy, that we're strong. That's because we are. So every chance I get, I'm going to sing that, to all people, especially my fat people out there who don't realize that that's what they are and what they deserve to hear. You don't need to go on any show, any freaking diet to try to reconcile what society wants or values. So, again, that's what I mean by I have some ground to make up.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I mean, I think the thing that sort of troubles me, boy, oh boy, you tell me, because you have physically been there and I have physically not. But I think the thing that sort of why it felt important to include the show and the book in particular was that, media is always about depicting somebody's reality, but it's also about reinforcing behaviors and the people who sort of consume that media.
True.
And there was something that happened around the rocket ship to the moon that was the rise of Jillian Michaels in particular, that was just like all kinds of people started to feel emboldened to say and do all kinds of things to all kinds of fat people because they were seeing that modeled not just as an acceptable behavior, but as one that benefits fat people, right? There is this wild sort of like Jedi mind trick that show is pulling, which is just like, you can be horrific in public to fat people, and that's actually for their benefit. And the more they object, the better a job you're doing, right? Which is like, if you care at all about consent, that should be raising some big red flags, right? Like that's like really
and it didn't end on the show. Afterwards, having been a contestant on the show, I remember, and I think I shared this on the podcast before, I was, I walked out of a Dairy Queen not even 6 to 8 months after my time on the show, and, a car was driving by, and I guess someone in the car recognized me, and they're like, "No, don't do it, Bernie." And I was just like, wow, I almost feel like you when you talked about how, well, what other shirt am I supposed to wear? It's 102 degrees out. I felt like saying, like, dude, it's the middle of summer. The ice cream is meant to be, it's just delicious. Like, what are you talking about?
Let me have my dilly bar in peace.
I was going to say, the only question should be, is that a dilly bar or a peanut butter parfait?
No.
Did you want chocolate ice cream or vanilla?
I go with the soft serve, dipped in the cherry.
Ooh, a cherry.
I don't know if it's a
soft
Midwest
serve.
thing because they have like chocolate and stuff everywhere else and butterscotch, but anyway. Yes, I mean, you're right. It did open up the door for people to feel as though they could be this negative voice, and it was coming from that place of caring, and it is not. And it was unwarranted, unwelcomed, and we definitely need to stop.
Bernie,
that.
I remember being with you and people noticing you and coming up and introducing themselves. Hey, you're such an inspiration. You're not really going to eat that, are you? And I'm like, what did I just see? So, I mean, I didn't live it, but I saw it a little bit.
No, absolutely. And it goes back to what I was sharing. Like, oh my gosh, I was an educator before the show. Not that this matters, right? But these are all things that I worked for that were personal achievements to me. I had my master's in education. I just was all around good person. I had great friends. And all of a sudden, I was just being judged on whether or not I was able to drop weight. Like, I could have literally kicked dogs in my spare time. And they would have been, but you lost weight, so you're a great guy. It's like, no, as a matter of fact, I kick dogs in my spare time. Yeah. But you look great now, So for me, it was really unpacking just this whole idea of worth and what people value, which unfortunately I think really brings us to present day, and we're seeing just how undervalued.
I do want to make one Biggest Loser note talking about present day, because this is our reality. We can talk about the Biggest Loser as if it's a thing of the past, but it really isn't, because to this day, there are companies right now, right, who are rolling out or planning, right, Biggest Loser like or ish, New Year, New You weight loss competitions, whether that's the people you imagine, right? The gyms or micro gyms or whatever with the virtual programs, whatever they're doing, right? But like places of employment. Hey, I know something fun. Let's have a new year, whatever. And it'll be like Biggest Loser. And it didn't go away, even though the show is no longer on the air. And to your point, Aubrey, about Jillian, she's still a monster to people. She is a monster, making stupid comments about, what was it, Lizzo, and won't be nice when you get diabetes. Oh, but I like your music. Just the gaslighting. And then she's compared diabetes to smoking. And she's just a hot mess. And she will literally, take her last breath shaming somebody for their size and swear that she's just trying to help them. And that's a sickness in her, and it's a mirror in our culture.
I mean, I think something that sort of ties together this, the dietetic stuff that we were talking about, the healthcare stuff, all of this kind of stuff is, one thing that we absolutely don't do when it comes to fatness and fat people is just look at what actually works. Like, what's our goal? And then what meets that goal? Because there are all kinds of people out in the world saying, well, I have to yell at this fat person, otherwise I won't know what to do. I have to sort of, restrict their food intake. There are parents who will put padlocks on the refrigerator so that their kids can't.
Yes.
Get it, right?
Oh, gosh.
All kinds of horrific stuff. And I would say, healthcare providers are part of this too, right? That there is like very little looking at, okay, if your goal is to have fewer fat people in the world, if you spend every office visit if you're a healthcare provider, telling fat people to lose weight, what is your success rate? How many of those fat people lose a bunch of weight? And how long are they able to keep it off for? Because if you have a mandate with no way of meeting it, then you don't actually have a strategy there, my guys. That doesn't work. If you think that yelling at fat people or sort of lecturing us about the food we eat, or even just saying things like, are you sure you want to eat that? Or don't do it, Bernie, right? More to the point.
Yeah.
If you think that that's helping, what's your success rate? How do you know it's helping?
Let's take a quick pause from this conversation for an important message from Bernie Salazar.
Hey listeners, Bernie Salazar here, asking you to support our show. Make your contribution at gofundme.com/bodykindness, and 100% of any amount you can give goes to offset the production expenses. If 20 people can donate $25, it pays for this episode. Again, that's gofundme.com/bodykindness to chip in and support our show. We're so grateful to have you as a listener, and we thank you for your support.
95 to 98% of diets fail. Diets meaning weight loss attempts here, not just things that are branded as diets. You don't get to just call it a lifestyle change and be like, now it's not a diet. I'm not here for the search and replace. You know what I mean? Like, no.
I just accepted a book because it was doing a bait and switch. And I was like, yeah, I'll take a copy of this, because I was like, I want to see the language of how this is being, and it's that exact kind of thing. And we're going to see it more and more, especially from physicians and like the classic thin white male doctor who has already written a bazillion books saying one thing. And now they're going to take their piece of this, self-care, the healthy lifestyle way. And, that's just bullshit. It's a diet in disguise.
Well, it's also happened with the Biggest Loser reboot, right? That they were sort of like, now it's about therapy and supporting you and all this sort of stuff. But ultimately, everyone's success is measured by how much weight they lose or don't lose, right? It's the same thing. They've sort of changed clothes, but it's the same sort of functional thing, right? But I mean, like, I just think about so my mom was a teacher and spent 50 years, in early childhood education. If she administered a test and 95 to 98% of students failed it, she would not say, boy, these students are a bunch of dummies. She would go, I didn't teach that well, or that test wasn't written right? Mm-hmm. This is a very strange sort of moment that we're in around fatness and fat people that sort of, again, to like having worked in like progressive community organizing, it's a moment when kind of everybody turns into like a hardline Republican. Right? That like everyone all of a sudden is like, it's your personal responsibility. You have to be thin. You have to do it this way. Right? Like all of that sort of stuff. And again, like our sort of willingness to empathize with people, our willingness to see even our loved ones as like people who are doing their best just all kind of goes out the window. It's
Aubrey, you're so right. Because even grandma's the first person to be like, oh my gosh, I love you so much, and you're like, grandma's wonderful and this or that. She's like, but you need to lose weight. You're like, damn. Grandma, where'd you come from? You're absolutely right. Like it's
totally
just so there. and it comes from literally people that are, out to save the world and, humane to animals, but, don't get them going on a fat person's body, because then it's a whole other conversation you're having and you don't even recognize the person you thought you knew.
Absolutely.
What I really enjoyed was how you brought this book around, and you specifically talk about this new world and some of the things that need to happen. This has to happen, and, just end the legal widespread practice of weight discrimination, realize the promise of healthcare for fat people, and in looking at this, right, and reading these things, increase access to public spaces and anti-fat violence, and the approval of weight loss drugs with dangerous, even fatal side effects. I'm reading this and I'm like, we are fighting for human basics here. And the fact that we have to say it is scary but needed. And I'm so glad that you brought it around by just flat out saying these are the things we need.
Well, and I think they are things that will, for some folks, they will read as super radical, right? Some folks, this will hit them as like the wildest stuff they have ever read.
Radical. Oh my gosh.
It is the very tip top of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, no, so I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my gosh, she is so right. And we have not been receiving any of this, and I tell Rebecca, depending on the day and how much sleep I've gotten because of the kids, like things hit me radically different. But I'm like, this is so right on. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that we're discussing this right now, that this is even up for debate. So when you talk about that, this may fall on people as radical, I'm like, oh my gosh. But, again, given where we're at right now, it doesn't surprise me, but it's needed. And I'm glad you put it down.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. I mean, I will say everything that is in that chapter are either campaigns that I have worked on in other communities, right? Or are policies that I've sort of like been part of passing or constructing or supporting or what have you. These are all things that have been done, right? Adding fat kids to the list of protected classes that shouldn't be able to be bullied in schools.
Amen.
The number one reason that kids are bullied in schools is because they are fat. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't get taken seriously. And it doesn't have there's no recourse within the school system to sort of end that. It's basically like, if you have a grown-up in your kid's school who believes them and who thinks it's worth their time, it will get handled. But other than that, tough luck.
You're right. It's one of those things that, I mean, it's just, it just is allowed to happen. It's, oh gosh, gym class for me, it just brings back memories. Like, shirts and skins. Like I would literally, if I was chosen as a skin, like I would fake any type of illness. Like I remember even thinking one time, like, should I jump off the bleachers and maybe break a leg? Like I won't have to take my shirt off. Like these are things that, go through your head. And these are things that you're thinking about at, 11, 12, 13, never mind high school years. If you try to play a sport and, coach is like, it's mandatory, everybody takes a shower. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I quit.
Yeah, totally.
Like, and then I'm not playing a sport that I loved.
Yeah, and I think part of what gets missed in some of these conversations is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because again, this is your experience and not mine, that it's not just about imagining people's judgments about your body in that moment of like taking your shirt off for shirts and skins, right? It's that you would hear that from other people in a sustained way for a long period of time, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, if I would have done that, like that's ammunition for the rest of my life against me. It wasn't just that moment of me feeling uncomfortable, and I can't even imagine, because I'm going to date myself. Like there were no cell phones back then. Now you have full on, you can shoot a movie on these phones, and I can't imagine, children being subjected to being recorded and then that being shared, and so when you put Stand Up for Fat Kids in there, like that as an educator by training, like that is so, so needed, because there are kids that I remember that were bullied because of their body size. And to be very honest, I wasn't on the end of a lot of harsh bullying. It was always just comments here and there, to which I was, again, the fat, guy who was funny. But I was able to kind of shield myself that way. But there were some, oh my gosh, there were some friends and fellow students that just weren't able to joke about it. And I don't know where they're at. I know that some of them ended up dropping out of school, and it just completely changes the trajectory of their life. And we're talking young, brilliant minds, kind people who just could not take any more of the body shaming and just disappeared.
And even Bernie, it's great that you don't have these experiences of personally of being bullied. And I even listened to you hear you say, like, the identity is this funny fat guy. It's kind of like, it sounds from my perspective, if I might say, like this acceptable consolation prize.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Like, I will do the burden and always be funny for you if you promise that you just won't be mean to me.
Yes. Oh, no. It was a complete defense mechanism, and it was the only way that I got through. And that's why a lot of the more harsh comments or the physical abuse, I didn't have to endure, because I had this personality that allowed me to kind of code switch, right, into these thin communities where same thing even as a Latinx male. I mean, in a predominantly white school, like I've spent my life as a chameleon. I'm just going to put it out there. And I'm tired. I just turned 40 and I'm fucking tired. And this is the most that I've ever sworn in an interview, mind you. This book, along with a lot of recent experiences, has left me really wondering at the age of 40, who the hell am I?
Yeah, it's so tricky. I mean, like, we just spend so much time sort of tap dancing to get people to not pay attention to the size of our bodies, or to be distracted enough by other aspects of who we are and how we are in the world and how we can be of service to them, right? And we do all of that just to sort of like reduce the harms that have come to us in the past, right? I mean, like, in a funny way, all of the stuff that you're talking about in school, right, of being sort of like funny fat guy, is not that dissimilar from everything that you and I were talking about when you get on a plane and you sort of like shove yourself into the corner and you bring your own seatbelt extender and you try not to go to the bathroom during the flight and you do all of these things not to be in the way of other people, in the hopes not that they will treat you better, but that they won't decide to hurt you in some like material ways. And it's a very strange thing. Like, as we're talking about this, I'm like, oh, right. In that way, high school kind of never ends for fat people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all high school.
Yes.
Anyway, as a 37-year-old, I feel you on the I'm tired.
But Aubrey, it's been so wonderful to talk to you and to celebrate all your success. And we've said the tip of the iceberg a lot today, but hopefully getting this first book out is the tip of the iceberg for your book writing career, and your freelance writing is wonderful. And I'll make sure to include all your links in the show notes. And just want to say thank you so much for coming and talking with us on Body Kindness today.
Absolutely.
It's been such a treat. Thank you guys so much. This is like the light of my day. What a treat.
Best of luck to you. Listeners, get to know you some Aubrey.
Or anonymously, your fat friend.
Yeah, there you go. All of it.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.